Well, the Netanyahu government has banned the South African ambassador to the state of Palestine, Sean Edward Beineveld, from entering Israel. Now, this decision came just hours after Pretoria took the same measures against a senior Israeli envoy for alleged diplomatic misconduct.
This decisive measure follows a series of unacceptable violations of diplomatic norms and practice which pose a direct challenge to South Africa's sovereignty. These violations include the repeated use of official Israeli social media platforms to launch insulting attacks against His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, and a deliberate failure to inform South Africa of purported visits by senior Israeli officials.
Well, the messages that sparked the outrage were traced to the official X account of the Israeli embassy in South Africa. In November of last year, these posts mocked the, quote, misuse of taxpayers' money in connection with Pretoria's case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. Well, that's where South Africa sued the Netanyahu government in 2023, accusing it of genocide in Gaza. The Israeli embassy account also made fun of President Cyril Ramaphosa, labeling one of his statements, quote, a rare moment of wisdom and diplomatic clarity. We can speak now live with the South African Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Crispin Puri, who joins us from Johannesburg. Crispin, good to have you on the program with us. Can you, first of all, take us through the South African government's perspective on this latest diplomatic standoff with Israel?
Thank you for having us, Rachel. The starting point, I think, is with the expellation of Ambassador Beineveld of Palestine, our ambassador to Palestine. I mean, that really shows the depravity of the Israeli government to go and remove someone who is not even an ambassador to your country. Just because you occupy that particular country really speaks to how obstructionist this regime is. And we really find that conduct regrettable. What we've seen over a series of months is the Israeli embassy in South Africa using the social media platform commonly referred to as X to really undermine the South African government. But as you just highlighted now, I think the two tweets that you have shown, there are two of many, really show how disrespectful and undiplomatic the conduct has been of the Israeli officials in South Africa. And that is why we had to take action, at least on that score. But I must say here, Rachel, and to our viewers all across the world on Russia Today, is that, you know, this action actually comes as a step of us having formally engaged the Israeli government. So this is not the first time we're having this conversation with the Israeli government, and that is why South Africa feels that at this point, perhaps expelling Mr. Seidman would send an appropriate message to Tel Aviv.
So, Crispin, your foreign ministry mentioned, quote, unacceptable violations of diplomatic norms and practice as part of the reasoning for why the Israeli diplomat was blacklisted. So was it just this conduct on social media, or was it a culmination of activity?
It was a culmination of activities. One of the other activities was the continued visits to South Africa by officials from the Israeli Foreign Affairs Department without the Department of International Relations and Cooperation in South Africa being informed. And we then saw some of these engagements resulting in some form of agreements with other spheres of government. Now, in the South African context, the Department of International Relations is governed by the Foreign Services Act. So that is the conduit for all diplomatic actions that should be taken in the country. And no one can undermine it. And what we saw the Israeli Chargé d'Affaires and the Israeli embassy doing was to circumvent that process and attempting to directly engage with other spheres of government as well as non-state actors in the country and making these seem as though they are official visits without the knowledge of the South African government. And that really is part of the actions that we believe were a culmination and an appropriate action needed to be taken against this type of behavior, which directly undermined the South African government.
What kind of results was South Africa expecting when it barred a senior Israeli diplomat from the country? Because that's a pretty extreme thing to do. And where do you think this dispute could potentially go next?
Look, what remains here is that we feel that the actions we have taken are consistent with Article 9 of the Vienna Convention, and we are entitled to take actions where we believe that our sovereignty has been undermined or the actions of a particular official are undiplomatic. So that is the step that we've taken, and we hope to see that the Israeli government will recalibrate their actions towards the South African government and engage us in a respectful manner. We do see now the retaliation rather being a strange one, but we hope that ultimately diplomacy will be brought back to the table, and we will be able to have people in this country sent by the Israeli embassy or Israeli government who are determined to push diplomacy and not ulterior motives.
How does this conflict with Israel affect South Africa's relations with other countries, notably allies of Israel itself?
I think this action must be viewed as a bilateral action. I think no self-respecting country would tolerate this level of disrespect from an embassy in its country, and other countries would accept that we are entitled to act in a manner in which we believe protects our sovereignty, but also upholds the dignity of the head of state of a country. You can imagine if this happened in Moscow, I'm sure Moscow would very take the same type of response. No self-respecting country would tolerate this level of disrespect.
I'm alluding to the U.S. government, though, the Trump administration, which has been putting a lot of pressure
on you are alluding to the
on South Africa. But is there any connection? Is there any connection to that?
Look, the fact of the matter is that we have bilateral relations with Israel. And our bilateral relations with Israel must be allowed to have a life of their own. We're not here on a leash for somebody else, and if that's the case, then they're gravely mistaken. We relate with countries as we deem fit. We direct our actions to the countries as we see appropriate, and we'll not tolerate being a conduit for anybody else.
Crispin, can you bring us up to speed on the status of South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice?
The case is there. Our memorial has been filed, and I must say, Rachel, it's forensically detailed with evidence of the genocide that's currently unfolding in Gaza. And we remain concerned by the escalating numbers of deaths, in spite of there being a ceasefire agreement. Nonetheless, we still see innocent people being killed. We expect that Israel will respond to our memorial sometime this year. I think they've been given an extension. I just can't recall, either between now and March. We expect Israel to respond to our memorial, and the case will continue at the International Court of Justice. We have seen, Rachel, how international law has been instrumentalized by a number of other countries, which maybe we would not name here now, to marginalize African countries. And when we stand up for international law, we would have hoped that the entire international community will stand up to uphold international law and not seek to punish South Africa because it's upholding international law, as was done in other African countries as well.
Is South Africa planning to take any more cases against Israel to an international court?
No, thus far the case that we have is sufficient and is a case that needs to be seen through. Of course, there are other cases that have been brought against Israel at the International Court of Justice. You would recall the advisory opinion on the occupation of the West Bank, where the International Court of Justice has ruled that the occupation of the West Bank is illegal. And to this day, still, we see that judgment not being enforced. That remains a concern. But from South Africa's perspective, we do not intend to bring a new case.
What about Israel's recent moves in Africa, becoming the first and only country in the world to recognize the breakaway region of Somaliland? What reaction do you have to that?
We have expressed concerns around that, and the African Union has also expressed the same view that we cannot have a situation where countries are being separated or or demarcated willy-nilly because it's convenient for one state. We still apply the principle of uti possidetis, which is that the colonial borders, as we have found them, must remain intact. And this is an important principle on the African continent, because if we are to start tampering with the colonial borders, we really are going to open a Pandora's box where we create all manner of states which ordinarily may not be viable states or may not be suitable to exist. The current configuration is an agreement that the African Union has, in fact, the predecessor of the African Union, the Organization of the African Union, has created, and this is where we are. So for Israel, again, to come and try and carve up the African continent to its convenience is also a blatant violation of international law, and it also violates all the principles that we have all upheld, particularly in the African Union context.
What do you think Israel is trying to achieve by this move in Africa?
Well, I am not here to try hypothesize what informs this conduct. I think for that your analysts can do well. But the fact of the matter, from where we see it, it's a violation of the AU Convention. It's a violation of what the African Union stands for.
Last year, Donald Trump threatened to impose crushing economic tariffs on BRICS countries if they try to ditch the U.S. dollar. How has South Africa been reacting to that pressure?
You know, you would recall that when BRICS was formed, and one of the actions that BRICS continues to pursue is to be able to trade in each other's currencies. And we think that's a significant step. It's very important that we're able to trade in our own currencies, and we'll continue to pursue that. We believe that is a form of economic sovereignty that we are entitled to. And what we want to see is BRICS increasing its trade amongst BRICS countries. And that's an important aspect of our aspirations for BRICS, and we'll continue to pursue that.
All right, Crispin, thank you so much for speaking with us. That's the South African Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Crispin Perry. Thank you.